Aloha. I'm Denise Yamaguchi, the Executive Director of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, and I want to welcome you to the Prince Waikiki for the 26th episode of Eat, Think, Drink, Farm to Institutions, Scaling Schools, Hospitals, and More. Tonight, we have the largest attendance, with 210 joining us for Eat, Think, Drink since the pandemic. Tonight's program is being recorded and will be available on our website, so please silence your phones and refrain from talking as a courtesy to those presenting this evening. I would also like to welcome for the first time to Eat Think Drink Governor Josh Green and First Lady Ruby Green. And I think Representative Kristen Kahaloa is here. I'm not sure if she's here yet, but she was supposed to be here tonight. By a show of hands, how many of you have been to Eat Think Drink in the past? Oh, lots of you. Okay, so normally there's not eating and drinking until after the program. But we're trying something new. So if you came a little early, you got to grab a drink and we'll see how it goes. The bar is now closed and it's going to be closed out of respect to the speakers and will reopen after the program. Before we start, I'd like to welcome Bobby, Senior Vice President of Central Pacific Bank and Hawaii Agricultural Foundation Board Member, to say a few words.
Good evening. We are pleased to sponsor the program tonight on farm institutions scaling ag to schools, hospitals, and more. Moreover, we are pleased to support Denise and the fine work of the Hawaii Agriculture Foundation. 2024 marks CPB's 70th anniversary. As many of you may know, we were founded by Nisei veterans who returned from the war as heroes yet could not find access to equitable financial services. So they got together under a banyan tree right over there at Ala Moana Beach Park and founded what would become Central Pacific Bank. It is in this spirit of hard work, belief in doing what's right, and sustainability that we are supporting Hawaii Agriculture Foundation. Its mission is to support and sustain Hawaii's agriculture industry through support of our local farm community, addressing critical needs, and creating a closer bond with community and key industries. And that's exactly what tonight's event is all about. It's amazing to think that our schools, hospitals, and other key service providers are today embracing and supporting the local farm community to the extent that they are. It not only provides critical financial support to a farm community that needs it, but also serves as a source of locally raised, healthy food for our keiki, hospital patients, and more. In this case, it truly is a win-win-win for critical demographic groups, the farm community, and the economic vitality of our state that continues to look for economic diversification. So on behalf of our president and CEO, Arnold Martinez, as well as the rest of the members of the CPB Ohana, we would like to say mahalo and compliment Denise and our fine work, as well as the rest of you who continue to support agriculture and put healthy meals on the table of our keiki. Mahalo.
Thank you, Bob. I'd also like to thank our supporting sponsors, Alexander and Baldwin, Bayer U.S. Crop Science, Hawaii Longline Association, Mahi Pono, Prince Waikiki Hotel, United Fishing Agency, Lend-Lease, Ulupono Initiative, Waihata, United Airlines, and Kamehameha Schools, and a special mahalo to N. Young and Nohili Thompson for recommending tonight's theme. You all know that good things happen when we gather to eat, think, and drink. The Hawaii Agricultural Foundation started Eat, Think, Drink back in 2016 to spark meaningful conversations about critical agriculture and food issues facing our community and to build a stronger network of conscious and caring consumers like you. Tonight marks our 26th event, and I want to share one of the good things that has happened as a result of Eat, Think, Drink over the years. Back in 2017, we invited Lou Cooperhouse, who was the executive director of the University of Rutgers Food Innovation Center, to speak on finding capital for value-added products. At that Eat, Think, Drink, a venture capital company, approached him to start up a food innovation company, and Blue Nalu was born. Today, Blue Nalu is a leading food technology company, food innovation company that grows fish out of fish cells. And while that company is based in San Diego, its name Blue Nalu is a tribute to the start of that company in Hawaii at Eat, Think, Drink. At that event, Liu also mentioned the high pressure pressurization machine that we now know as HPP machine that could create longer shelf life for perishable foods. After that Eat, Think, Drink, many of you lobbied for that HPP machine. And today, our first HPP machine is in operation at the Leeward Community College Wahiawa Value Added Product Development Center. Like our previous Eat, Think, Drinks, we are again looking to bring you all together to make good things happen. Tonight's Eat, Think, Drink on farm to institution, scaling to schools, hospitals, and more. In recent years, the push for institutions like schools, hospital, and other large organizations to purchase from local agricultural sources has gained momentum. However, the path to effective local sourcing is not without challenges. Tonight's discussion will explore strategic solutions to these barriers and feature stories from institutions that have successfully implemented local sourcing. We will discuss the opportunities for collaboration between farmers, distributors, and institutional buyers, highlighting the importance of partnership in creating a resilient and sustainable food system. Our keynote speaker this evening is Paula Daniels, co-founder, chief of What's Next, and founding chair for the Center for Good Food Purchasing. Please welcome Paula Daniels.
Aloha. And mahalo to the Hawaii Ag Foundation for asking me to come. I'm truly honored to address you all, especially as many of you in the audience have been doing food systems work for such a long time. You're food system experts, and I don't really need to tell this crowd why local food is important. I think a lot of you have been involved in it for a long time. And we've also had enough hurricanes and pandemics and fires that really make that point better than I could. But I will talk tonight about some of the things I've seen along the way that might be helpful. And actually, I think that a lot of these things are already in place in Hawaii. I moved from here to go to USC a long time ago. I come back a lot and stay in touch with things going on as much as possible through my grandparents when they're around on Maui and Oahu. My mom, Jackie Young, who was state representative here in the early 1990s. Both my sisters live here. They're right there in the audience. My brother, who lives in North Carolina, is a professor of aquaculture, is thinking about moving back to Hawaii's as deep in our hearts as it is in our DNA. Our family's generational experience in Hawaii led me into the field of food policy. We are descendants of a Kanaka Maoli member of Hawaii Parliament when it was a monarchy, who owned a taro flour company in Maui in the late 19th century. My dad was born on the Punane sugar plantation and raised there, where our grandfather was the maintenance engineer at the mill. I was born in Honolulu when it was a territory and at peak pineapple production. I just remember all those pineapple fields in Wahiawa where we lived for a time. Growing up, I remember being pretty puzzled about the state of things here, the food system, the monoculture industrial system, and it stuck with me. I carried it with me through my career, and I continued to pay attention to learn as much as I could about it. I ended up becoming involved in systems change in various areas. I'm an attorney. I was involved in legal systems and worked on systems change there. The water system, I got involved in water policy in California at a publicly appointed level. And the urban forest system, solid waste management system. And I was finally able to have a leading role in food systems change in LA when I was working as a senior official with Mayor Villaraigosa of Los Angeles, and he agreed that we needed to start a food policy framework for the city of LA and improve local food. And at that time, it was not something people were thinking about in LA. And I guarantee you it was an uphill battle to convince people that the city should care about where its food comes from, but now it does. And that's how we ended up creating the program we did, which I'll talk about in a second, which is now a national program. It started with recognizing that the city's purchasing power can have a lot of influence on the entire food system. So I was doing this work in LA and nationally, because did a lot of work on the federal level as well. And then I heard about Hawaii's Aloha Plus Challenge, and I just remembered I have slides. So, and I was told by Keone earlier that I am supposed to point there. So if I do that, just so you understand, we're going to try to make it work. Yay. So I heard about Hawaii's Aloha Plus Challenge, and I got to tell you, mental cartwheels. I was really happy about this because I've been thinking of metrics as a way to create change for a long time in institutions. And Hawaii stepped up with a really big goal, 30%. And this actually, it joins New York State has a 30% goal, and they have an incentive fund for 30% in their school districts. Brazil has a 30% target for local food. So does Singapore. And actually, while it's not a metric, these local food system targets are quite globally recognized. I know we've been talking about a lot on Hawaii for Hawaii's particular reasons, but it's also a priority goal of the Food and Agriculture Organization, United Nations, and over 280 cities around the world have signed the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, which also prioritizes building local food systems. So around the time Governor Ige committed to the Aloha Plus Challenge, I was meeting folks in Hawaii, Kyle Dada, then it was the Ulupa'a Initiative, Betsy Cole, who was then head of the Kahala Center, and I heard about the Aina Pono Farm to School Initiative, and I'm talking about all these initiatives for a reason, which I'll tie together in a second. But the Aina Pono Initiative is a farm to school initiative spearheaded by Lieutenant Governor Sean Tsutsui in 2015. And hopefully Jason Watts, who was involved with it at the time as well, now with Mahi Pono, will have a chance to talk about it later. And then pretty soon I got to know Albie Miles of the University of Hawaii and Amy Brinker of Kamehameha Schools, who was then working on food systems work. Claire Sullivan, who's now a FarmLink, but when she was with Whole Foods and then Ma'o Farms. There are so many superstars in Hawaii working in the food system, and too many to really list here, and too many good initiatives. But I will mention a few along the way. So these conversations about how Hawaii can create a regionalized, revitalized, modern-day Ahupua'a-style food system out of the asphalt of the plantation era are absolutely inspiring. And I believe when Hawaii does it, it'll be a model for the rest of the world. In 2020, my organization that I co-founded, and I call myself Chief of What's Next because I'm always saying, so what do we do next? Like we did this, now what do we do next? So I gave myself that title. I've had other titles, attorney, commissioner, board member, all that. I like this title the best. But we'd expanded from its start in LA in 2012 to over 20 US major metropolitan areas. And by 2020, we'd already analyzed hundreds of millions of dollars. We get the purchasing information from institutions and we rate them kind of like an audited ESG screen, if you can think of it that way. And then we'd already been doing that. We'd help move the needle for about 60 public food service institutions, most of them school districts. And so then I was fortunate enough to be invited by Albie Miles of UH to bring this experience to Hawaii as part of the 3-year USDA Regional Partnership Grant. We named the work, I got to do this, Transforming Hawaii's Food Systems Together. So it's still doing a lot of good work, holding food summits annually. And it just so happened that during the time of the grant project, the state legislature backed up the Aloha Plus challenge goals with Act 175, which is a law requiring the Department of Education, I'm sure most of you have heard about it, to get to 30% local by 2030. There was also a companion bill for all state agencies to hit key percentages of local food over time. So there's a lot of good momentum behind the Aloha Plus Challenge and a lot of good leadership and transformative policies. And also during that time, Mayor Blangiardi and Council Chair Waters stepped in with a commitment to good food program for Honolulu City and County, thanks to Dexter Kishida, who was working at the county then and now, thanks to the governors at the Department of Agriculture. All of this creating political momentum and policy enactments, which are an important pillar for food system transformation. And along with that, Kamehameha Schools and Punahou Schools, Debbie, you're in the audience from Punahou Schools, enrolled in our Good Food Purchasing Program, leading by example toward that 30% goal. Now, here's a little bit of how our program works. Enrollment in our program means that we analyze how an institution's purchasing data lines up with key metrics like local food targets. This is a hypothetical example, but a pretty typical one of the type of information we give to institutions. We get all their purchasing data, and then we give them this analysis. According to our baseline, which is hitting a target of 15%, it means that, they met the baseline. And in some places, they do a lot more than that. So we also can help with procurement practices to achieve their value-based goals in purchasing more locally sourced, environmentally sustainable, share labor produced, humane, and nutritious food. The nutrition is a checklist. So here's an example of kind of dashboard we can create for them if there are more institutions involved in a region. So you can kind of benchmark against other regions and share best practices. Very database. But obviously, our theory of change is based on a theory that institutional purchasing is a key leverage point for food systems change. The United Nations has this same view. This is a quote from a report by the 2014 UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. In addition to supporting local food systems and shorter supply chains, he really emphasized quite a bit about the need for government to have public procurement to make this change as a key lever. So France actually has taken this to a new level, as France does. We know that from just watching the Olympics, but they have 50% purchasing targets for sustainable and quality food is what they call it. They have their own certification system, and they require all of their canteens, they call them schools, hospitals, correctional facilities that have food service to report to them in a publicly available reporting database. So I looked at some just in Paris region alone, 5,000 institutions have already reported, and 30% of them have hit their targets. France has a lot of laws in place to support this work. In the US, the momentum for local food systems keeps building, especially with the Biden administration. There's a lot of federal funding from them targeted specifically to supporting local food systems and also indigenous foodways. Our traditional foodways are fundamental to Hawaii's future health, both for people and for Aina. I heard Stacey Ferreira this morning at a panel I went to, Stacey Ferreira of OHA, say a healthy ecology is a healthy economy. And I couldn't agree with her more. In some other really great news and building on the momentum for local supply chain infrastructure, the Hawaii Food Hub Hui, which is part of the Hawaii Good Food Alliance. I think you're in the house. Hawaii Good Food Alliance in the house. Yes. Yay. They got a $30 million USDA grant last year to run a regional business center for the non-contiguous states and territories. And of course, they're going to focus on Hawaii. They're one of 9 that was awarded around the country. So congratulations to them. And we're really looking forward to that good work. This really, really backs up the aggregation and distribution potential for local food. And let's see, hold on. Which is a key pillar of all the different areas that you need to hit on in order to make food system change. Work has to happen in all these 4 areas in order to have system change work. And in that infrastructure category, we know about the good work going on in Wahiawa, more value add a local processing infrastructure going up there, thanks to Senator Dela Cruz. So with all the gains coming from our state and the state legislature, I just want to assure you that I know, because I've been working on the Farm Bill this last year and this year, that Hawaii's federal legislators are also on top of it. They're advancing Native Hawaiian interests in the Farm Bill. They're coming up with Senator Hirono submitted a bill coming up with improvements to GusNIP, also known as the Bucks here. And now Congresswoman Takuda is on the House Ag Committee. So she's holding the line over pending, excruciating Farm Bill discussions. And Hawaii also has an impressive network. This is a key pillar of making any systems change. An impressive network of really smart people working on this issue. This is a Kuma slide that I put together. I needed some help, I'll admit, from my assistant, but I put this together just because I was meeting all these folks doing food system work here, and I wanted to map out the blue is a person or organization. There's let me let this link. There's groups, there's teams, there's foundations. I just wanted to understand how people were connected. And you can see there was a lot, but that's not even all of it. I stopped because Dr. Noah Lincoln of the University of Hawaii was also part of the work, and he did, which we will get to soon. And he did a very thorough, rigorous study as part of the regional planning grant. And he found that this is all the network connections here. He found that over 1,650 people and organizations are working on food systems in Hawaii, and they have over 3,300 connections. So this is a really important attribute of systems change. And he also found that more and more nonprofits were getting involved in the work. I would say, if I had a recommendation to make, it would be that it would be great to make this an even bigger tent with even more food service business folks involved, more labor. We work with the United Farm and United Feed Commercial Workers and the Teamsters nationally. They support a lot of policy change around food systems and local food systems, more workforce development, and more culinary arts, and more grocery retail folks involved in all this policy work. I have to say, I was so impressed with everything that I was learning that I started a podcast to highlight these really bright spots. So see, Tamara is no, she's in the next page, but you probably will recognize most of the folks in the images here. But I wanted to highlight the bright spots for people in Hawaii who maybe needed, a different way to learn about what's going on. But also, I wanted to share this with the continent across the U.S. because I really think this is a place to pay attention to. And as it turns out, I actually have an international audience. I didn't expect it, but there's a lot of viewers in Europe and in practically every continent. Singapore, Australia, it surprised me, but India, Portugal. Is Tamara there? I'm sure I know she was in my Tamara. She's here in the audience. I know I had a podcast episode with her, Tamara with Lanoa Chocolate, and now with Ulu Co-op, Hawaii Ulu Co-op, which is also doing tremendous work. We have about 11 episodes. We just posted the last one earlier this week. And I'm hoping to get Celeste Connors. She's coming up next, actually, and Dex Fishita, Brian Miyamoto, probably everybody in the panel coming up. So, all right, there's a lot of good stuff going on, but there's also, I think we all know about some disturbing trends, like this report from Civil Beat that there's a loss of farmland. This can be a game changer. Other parts of the system can rebound from setbacks, but a loss of arable land is a hard stop. This really just underscores the urgency of now in terms of time to double down on our actions. I know Hawaii Land Trust is working on it. I know there's a lot of good work going on, but that's a really disturbing statistic. And I also don't mean to gloss over a number of other persistent problems that local agriculture faces. This is a list I got from a meeting that I had with Janelle Yamamoto of Go Farm Hawaii. And there's not enough time to really go through all this other than to say that while Hawaii's ag problems in some respects have commonality with places on the continent, including loss of farmland, that's happening all over the country. Being a geographically isolated archipelago indeed is unique. No kidding, but particularly in terms of the cost of absolutely everything. And this is where federal or state policy can also step in and help. And I know a number of legislators have been working to address that. There's provision for inter-island shipping cost reimbursement in the FAR bill. I know that's come up before. There's lots of ways to get at those cost issues from a public policy standpoint. But food systems are really complex, and probably more so than a lot of other systems because of the way it's structured. And any change needs to fire on all those 4 cylinders that I showed you before from the slide with the USDA. They're working on all of those areas of production, processing, aggregation, and distribution, and market demand from institutions and consumers. And then there's the underlying movement tectonics. So based on our work over the last decade, we now have 70 municipal food service institutions and over 25 major metropolitan areas that we're working in. And we work with about 250 organizations based locally or nationally. We synthesized what we saw into these 4 key elements, which we noticed were making a difference. And I've already talked about how Hawaii has all these things, as I showed you in the examples before, including an impressive amount of homegrown local talent, like Keone Lee with Hawaii Investment Ready, who think strategically about finding these leverage points. And I just wanted to share with you this quote, because I think it's really important to think about how we make this change. It's to identify the leverage points that are highly connected to other parts of the system, which will make those nodes behave differently and cause the systems to evolve, like institutional purchasing. I've already mentioned some of these key strategic leverage points that I'm going to show in this next slide. These are some of the leverage points that I've seen underway here, including pilot programs like Anopono. And there's some others we won't have time to touch on really, but capital flows, land access, workforce support, they're underway as well here. But since we're still only at about 6%, from what I understand, local food in our public food service institutions, might feel like we're kind of stuck. But honestly, I do think the conditions are ripening for state institutions, especially to get to the 30% goal. And pretty quickly, if they're able to make the relationship and best practice changes that can unlock that potential. It does mean rewiring some hardwired business practices that are left over from the mid 20th century, post World War II food system that I was born into. It means shifting from an on demand, low cost model to a relationship based commitment to community model. It takes some time, it takes some restructuring, but like the hard work that goes into remodeling a house, it's worth it in the end. You go through a lot of heck in the meantime, but it's worth it in the end, right? And on a nuts and bolts level, we've come across examples of best practices of these shifts in the new way of doing business that have been, there we go, that have been really successful in other places. Forward contracts. Minneapolis Public Schools has nailed this down for their farm to school program, and they're doing really great in it. So forward contracts are an agreement made in advance of the growing season to buy a farmer's crop. These contracts can help reduce market risk for smaller farmers and ultimately can create more certainty on both ends of the invoice. They place more value on relationships. And, even food service companies can that work with institutions can help facilitate these relationships in forward contracts. And guess what? Yeah, it's happening here. If I can get the slide to show. This is from the Kamehameha Schools Food System Initiative. And the way they describe it, their comprehensive food system initiative, they really express it well in this graphic about how it all feeds into each other to make this change. And even better, they are doing it well. They are getting to about 50% local. If you want more details, you have to listen to my podcast episode with Leon Kami PS. Leon's here somewhere. Where is she? Yeah, there she is. It's one of my favorite interviews. It was I hope you listen to that episode. I know I'm pitching my podcast, but really I'm more pitching Leon because I really enjoyed the interview. She lays it out beautifully there. So if this can spread to other institutions and scale, it would provide more and more assurance to more and more Hawaii farmers of a reliable market for their goods so that they could make the capital investments, the lease arrangements, the hiring and time commitments necessary to stay in the business of producing more healthy food and maybe even enable them to acquire some land. And I was just told I'm POW and I have like 5, 10. Sorry. Sorry. It's okay if I keep going for a little bit more. I'll try and talk fast. I'll try and get through this fast. Because what I want to talk about is what's missing. Like, what do we need next? I've talked about what we've done, but what I want to get to is where we need to get to. So systems change. There's a lot of study in this area. And some books have been written lately, which, let's see, start. This is supposed to go fast. Can you do the next? Can you hit the next? There we go. Which show how it happens. But this is what I want to show you. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. It feels like it takes some time. It takes, it's a continuous experimentation. It's not a straight line, but it trends upward. There's failed experiments, there's continual experiments, but you eventually get there. So I was going to give you an example from public energy systems, but since I'm short on time, I'm going to just skip through it. Just know that there was a lot of ups and downs on that. I wrote an article about it. I did some research on it in 2016. I was granted a fellowship for that. And I looked at public energy systems because I think there's some strong analogies between how renewable energy came up in a monolithic oil and fossil fuel structure and what types of interventions happen to make that happen to how we can think about it with the food system. So the bottom line is it was started a long time ago by Carter. But look at that line. It's all caught up. We know that, right? And what I wanted to show you too, next slide, please, is that it really takes off in this century in 2010. It started in the 70s. It went up and down because Carter did it, Reagan undid it. And then starting in around 2010, just so happens that Punahou grad was in the White House at that time, that it started taking off. But look at that exponential growth curve. Okay, next slide, please. The thing is that next slide, and then the next slide. Okay, so policies made a difference. Next slide, please. But when a Punahou grad was in the White House, there was also a reinstitution of incentives and other pilot projects has really helped. The thing about it is, starting under Carter, down under Reagan, back in Obama, the executive branch really does make a difference when they have an all-hands-on commitment to this and in instituting policies. So creating incentives, using forward contracts, that led to it a lot. Next slide, please. But there's a couple other things that need to change. So mental models. I've talked about all the other 4 points on this slide. The policy changes, the power dynamics, the resource flows and all of that. We've already talked about that, but I think we still have to talk about mental models. And what does this leading expert in system change mean by mental models? Deeply held beliefs and assumptions and taken for granted ways of thinking. So there's something I'm going to speed through next. Next slide. This happened in South Korea. They had a very privately contracted for pre-prepared meals, heat and serve in their cafeterias. There was a serious outbreak of foodborne illness in 2006. It started public protests, and so then the government took over the whole program. They decided to do scratch kitchen. They took on their own distribution system. They took on their own certification system to make sure it was safe. And then in Seoul, they also moved this to the point where they're able to get 60% local sourcing of food because they said, we're just going to do it. We own the whole system. We're going to do it. I'm not necessarily suggesting we do that here, but it's an interesting example when you have a distribution hub that is mission dedicated to sourcing local food, like the Hawaiʻi Food Hub Foods do. So an important point there. So how does this show up in Hawaii? Next slide, please. Okay, this is the one I really wanted to talk about. I hear this all the time. Do you all hear this? I hear this all the time. There's not enough supply. Well, the reality is we need to activate the demand in order to create supply. I hear folks don't want to go into farming. There are a lot of people who want to go into farming. They just need the conditions made available to them to make farming a viable economic activity. And then this one, it costs too much to buy local. The thing is, it costs too much to not buy local. There are many positive benefits to Hawaii from a more robust local food system. Job creation, economic diversification, value retention, better health outcomes, and a better environment. It's known that you can almost double the economic impact of every dollar spent on local food because the indirect and induced impacts are also local. What that means is for every dollar spent on a local business, the profits get spent here too, instead of going to Arkansas or somewhere else like that. And there are too many negative impacts in the business as usual system. Let's go through these next slides really quickly. I was a part of a study that quantified the negative impacts of food system. Next, please. And it really revealed the high cost of cheap food. Next slide, please. And this is how it shows up. Let's just say the hidden costs, the negative impacts are 3 times greater in all dimensions than the actual cost of food. And what that means is that society then has to pay for that. We all pay for it one way or another. Society bears a cost, and that means that our state government has to figure out, it has to coolie on it for how to pay for that. So a local food system can improve vastly on these outcomes, and in the long run, it may actually prove to cost less than the high cost of cheap food. So it also maybe if you have the assurance of a high volume, long-term forward commitments on a broader scale, some of those cost differentials might be smoothed out for an institution on a tight budget. Maybe with a high volume, long-term commitment, a farmer might be able to price things a little bit differently. So it took a massive outbreak of food poisoning to induce South Korea to make these shifts. We've had the hurricanes, pandemic, fire, to make it clear how fragile the global supply chain is, and we can no longer be dependent on it. We got kind of used to it, but we can't be dependent on it. So I want to also thank Governor Green for recognizing this and putting Amanda Shaw of Oahu Agriculture Conservation Association in her new role as local food systems coordinator. Is Amanda here? I see her in the back. All right. Make sure you talk to her later. Thank you for that, Governor Green, and for coming and listening to this program. We know your heart is in this work. So what's left for us to do? Next slide, please. Mental model shifts. Can you hit the button again? At all levels of the system, not just in the networks that I mapped out. What's needed is some kind of innovation contagion. So my sister works at Apple. I'm going to quote Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs. He said, innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not a threat. So maybe we need to think of rewiring procurement practices as an opportunity, not a hassle. Maybe we need to look at new ways to make ag land more affordable. Maybe we could model it after the policy tools and incentives we use to make housing affordable. Might be a great opportunity. Next slide, please. Theodore Levitt, the editor of the Harvard Business Review, said, creativity is thinking of new things. Innovation is doing new things. And I'm pretty convinced that we're all there. We're almost at that tipping point. The ideas, the people, the projects, all of it is here already. We just need to be doing it all more. And we all just need to be doing it all. And next slide, please. 2030, be here before you know it. And I think when we get there, maybe we'll look back and see that exponential growth line starting from this year, because change happens slowly, but then it happens all at once. That's it. Next slide. All right. Thank you for listening.